Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is yet to secure a meeting with US President Donald Trump. It comes as various points of tension in the relationship have been in focus on trade, on the fate of the AUKUS agreement, differences now over the Middle East as well. While the President is yet to sit down with the Prime Minister, a delegation of members of Congress have been in Australia. They've been visiting various states but were primarily here for the annual Australia-America Leadership Dialogue. The head of that congressional delegation is Democrat Senator Chris Coons. He is a member of the US Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and I spoke to him at the conclusion of his visit. Senator Coons, thanks so much for your time. Look, you've observed this relationship over many years. Right now it is facing some difficulties over trade. There's uncertainty over AUKUS. The two leaders have not met yet in person. How would you describe the state of the relationship right now?
Well, David, thank you for a chance to be on. It's been my honor to lead a bipartisan delegation to the Australian-American Leadership Dialogue in Adelaide. We just met with Prime Minister Albanese here in Sydney. And I think our deep partnership on this 80th anniversary of victory in the Pacific in the Second World War is as strong as it's ever been. Our partnership and our cooperation on defense, on intelligence, our economic ties, our ties of values and culture are very strong. Yes, there are some tensions in the relationship. There are some concerns. But a large part of why I led a bipartisan and bicameral delegation from the American Congress to the AALD in Adelaide was to have all of us speak with one voice, that we support AUKUS, that we support continued investment, and that we see Australia as a critical and valued partner in security and stability.
That congressional support for AUKUS does seem clear. The Pentagon review, however, is still underway. How worried should Australia be about where that review might land?
Well, look, I understand the concern, but every new administration, whether in Australia, the UK, or the US, will look at such a significant strategic commitment made by a previous administration and review it. So frankly, I'm not that concerned or anxious about this review. There is strong bipartisan support for this program. And I think if there were to be some unexpected change in direction, there'd be very strong pushback from Republicans and Democrats who I've spoken with in Senate leadership, as well as across the delegation that's just been here to Australia.
So does that mean there would be bipartisan congressional pushback at any shifting of the goalposts on this AUKUS agreement?
I'm very optimistic there would be, yes.
Should Australia nonetheless be thinking about boosting defence spending? The Defence Secretary, Pete Hegseth, we know, wants Australia to get to 3.5% of GDP. Should Australia be prepared to take that step?
Well, many of our other key partners and allies around the world, particularly in NATO, have, given the changing threat environment around the world. We're increasingly seeing Russia, Iran, the DPRK and the PRC coming together and forming a partnership that increasingly threatens free societies, free market economies. And given the tempo of activity here in the Australian region, in the South Pacific, by the PRC and by their Navy, I do think an increased investment in defense would be justified. Of course, that's a decision for the Australian government, the Australian people. But one of the messages I'll be taking back to Washington is that our partnership is much broader and much deeper than just AUKUS, even though AUKUS is a truly significant generational investment in capabilities. Whether it's critical minerals or some of the most advanced research being done into artificial intelligence or quantum computing, Australia is a partner and ally that the United States badly needs. So together, we should be investing in increased capabilities and in increased security.
So that really is a bipartisan view in the United States, that Australia needs to get beyond the just over 2% of GDP spent on defence at the moment.
Well, David, I do think that you need to be counting apples to apples. The way that our NATO allies are counting their percentage of GDP, I'm told would give Australia credit for north of 2.7 or 2.8%. So the commitments made at the NATO summit that were more in the line of 3.5 might be significantly easier for Australia to reach, given that your accounting doesn't quite give you full credit.
So that's interesting. If we included shipyards and other infrastructure, we would get to around 2.7 or 2.8% of GDP.
Exactly.
And what about the other contributions that Australia makes under AUKUS? Access to submarine rotational force west, the top-end air bases, the other geographical contributions that Australia makes. How important is that to the United States?
Very. As we reflect on our service shoulder to shoulder in the Second World War, which concluded just 80 years ago today, it's important to be reminded that we were serving alongside each other all over this region, and the capacities that Australia is offering in westernmost Australia for the refurbishment and resupply of our current nuclear-powered submarine fleet and for future joint activities. Talisman Sabre, which was a very large, very complex training exercise, has just concluded here in Australia, and it was a reminder to all Americans, and in particular our Department of Defense, of just how much Australia brings to the table, not just geographically, but in terms of capabilities, will, and engagement.
And does the Trump administration, do you think, understand that point? Because the Australian government does seem very keen to make that point, that there's a lot on the table here for the United States as well.
Well, your very capable ambassador in Washington, D.C. Helps make that point. I am looking forward to making that point to senior members of the Trump administration when I get back, along with the Republican members of our delegation that's been here in Australia.
And on the trade front, you're not a supporter of Donald Trump's tariff approach, which does include tariffs on Australia. From what you've observed on this visit, do you think it is hurting public opinion towards the United States?
Well, I think it has impacted public opinion. I was at the Lowy Institute earlier today and had the chance to review in more depth their most recent poll and what it shows about the opinion of the United States here in Australia. And while there may be some real frustration and concern about the tariffs and what's perceived as economic coercion, there also remains a very high positive attitude towards the U.S.-Australia defense and security partnership and our core of shared values. I will be urging the administration when I return to Washington to take into account just how much Australia is doing for our shared concerns and interests in this region, and the fact that we have a trade surplus with Australia. The tariff decisions that have been made so far have been somewhat chaotic and don't clearly seem to me to track with our core strategic interests. So I'll certainly be making that case that this irritant in our important relationship ought to be put to the side.
Is Australia's decision to recognise a Palestinian state an irritant in the relationship? Do you think this will be an irritant in the relationship?
Well, the statements by President Trump recently suggest that there is a shared goal, which is ending the war in Gaza, ending the suffering of the Palestinian people, innocent civilians in Gaza, and ending Hamas as a fighting force and as the organization, the terrorist organization that has largely controlled Gaza. My understanding of the terms of the proposed Australian recognition is that it includes a precondition that Hamas be disarmed and no longer be governing or having a leading role in Gaza. So I think President Trump's recent statements on this proposed recognition by Australia is that we're trying to achieve similar goals by different paths.
Nonetheless, this is not something either side of politics in the United States would agree with, is it?
Correct. It is a difference. But it's also a difference that we in the United States have with other close and trusted allies like Canada and some of our European partners.
Just finally, how important is a meeting between the two leaders? They have not met face-to-face yet. Should Anthony Albanese be doing all he can to secure a meeting with President Trump?
I'm optimistic there will be a meeting between President Trump and Prime Minister Albanese within the next month. But frankly, they've spoken regularly. Our relationship remains deep and broad, and the foundations on which our relationship rests are unshaken. So when they do have a chance to meet in person, I suspect it'll be a very constructive, forward-looking conversation, and hopefully one that reaffirms our shared commitment to AUKUS and to a strategic future where we are both guarantors of peace and security in the Indo-Pacific.
And when you say in the next month, you're confident that will happen, you're suggesting around the time of the Prime Minister's visit to New York for the UN General Assembly?
I'm just expressing hope that that's what happens. I certainly don't have access to President Trump's calendar book.
Fair enough. And would you have any advice for Anthony Albanese about how to approach such a meeting? We've seen other leaders have, well, mixed success when it comes to sitting down with Donald Trump.
Oh, being himself. We just had a delightful, engaging, positive meeting with him. I think he represents Australia well on the world stage. And I think he's got a lot to speak about the ways in which Australia has partnered with us for decades, and the way that you're leading in the Pacific Islands in terms of investing in development and diplomacy and defense. We stopped in Papua New Guinea before coming to Australia, and there's huge excitement there about the deepening relationship between Australia and PNG, not just from a security perspective, but from a sports perspective. And so continuing to hear in other places we have visited and will visit about Australia's leadership, I think is the sort of foundation for a constructive meeting with President Trump that may lead to good results in the coming months.
And if you can offer a bit more defence spending, that won't hurt.
Certainly wouldn't hurt.
All right, Senator Coons, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you.